After House Republicans had left for the long weekend, taken their Memorial Day weekend vacation, House Democrats stayed in the House on the House floor and spoke about the irresponsibility of the House GOP's recent actions in trying to leverage the raising of the debt ceiling to get spending cuts through cutting spending to crucial programs, because they say they're concerned with the debt and the deficit, and that's why they're doing this. That's why they're threatening by not raising the debt ceiling in time to throw us into an economic disaster, because they say they're concerned with the debt and the deficit, even though if they actually were, they would not continue to sign off on, as they've done under Republican administrations, massive tax cuts that disproportionately go to those at the top of our economic ladder, as we've been talking about. The hypocrisy is clear, the dishonesty is clear, and because of that, we're approaching a very scary situation with the debt ceiling not being raised in time and the United States defaulting on its debt. And so with that being said, some of these speeches, these remarks from House Democrats on the floor, again, after Republicans, even though this crisis is looming, had gone off for their long weekend, some really good remarks were made here, and I want to show you some of this. First, Robert Garcia. Take a look.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to the Republican plan to destroy our nation's economy. Right now, hundreds of Republican members of Congress have rushed out of town to go on vacation with their friends and family. Democrats are here ready to work. Americans are facing the reality of losing their retirement savings, jobs, and health care. Here are just some of the extreme demands that House Republicans have made. They want to cut 100,000 jobs for teachers. They want to put health insurance at risk for 21 million Americans. They want to put food assistance at risk for 1 million Americans. This is cruel and shameful. Let's be clear, House Republicans want to tank the economy, and they want to give tax cuts to billionaires and large corporations. We have a default on our debt coming because House Republicans would rather be on vacation than get to work. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Connecticut?
We went through the specifics in a past segment on this, but it's really wild to see the fact that what's driving the very problem they're now pointing to is the irresponsible fiscal policy of the GOP. It is these massive tax cuts and extending the massive tax cuts that were done under Bush, under Trump, that disproportionately benefit those at the top of our economic ladder. That is why we're in the situation that we're in now. Again, you can find a past video on the debt ceiling where more of the specifics were outlined as to how this is the case. But if we were bringing in more revenue from those who can absolutely afford it, more reasonably taxing those at the top, we wouldn't have the issue that we do now with the problem that they say they're concerned with, debt and thus deficit spending. Next moment here from Hakeem Jeffries.
And so we helped make sure we avoided a default 3 times, notwithstanding the fact that in our country's 247-year history, 25% of the nation's debt was racked up under the 4 years of the Trump administration. How dare you lecture America about fiscal responsibility with that shameful record? Notwithstanding the fact that you've racked up unprecedented amounts of debt to subsidize the rich, the richest amongst us, and big corporations. We never threatened a default. But yet here we are, a few days from America being unable to pay our bills because you've made a political calculation that you will be successful in 2024 if you crash the economy. That's wrong. That's cruel. That's un-American. Because you'll be hurting veterans, hurting children, hurting seniors, hurting young people, hurting everyday Americans. And that's why Democrats are here today in Washington, fighting hard against this unreasonable manufactured default crisis.
Absolutely. And as he pointed out, nearly a quarter of all of the debt that's been acquired in the history of the United States of America was under the Trump administration. And some of that I don't blame Republicans for, as I've said before, because a lot of spending had to be done during the COVID pandemic and the economic crisis that caused. I do think we were going to have to take on a lot of debt and spend a lot of money in a crisis like that. But some of that, far too much of it, did have to do with the nearly $2 trillion, I think it's $1.7 trillion over a decade in the increased deficit because of the Trump tax cuts that disproportionately went to those at the top. That is what you call fiscally irresponsible governance right there. And so to bring on that amount of debt and then turn around, and when it comes time to pay the bills under a Democrat, even though a lot of the financial obligations we're fulfilling were signed off on under the Trump administration. These are Trump's bills in large part, if you want to phrase it that way. Now they're saying, we're not going to unless you give us all of our dream policy items. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. The record of Democrats versus Republicans on fiscal responsibility is very clear. And I always bring up in relation to this because it's very interconnected, and also a big misnomer is the economy as well. We've gone through it so many times, but undeniably the economy does better under Democratic rule, under Democratic governance. And same thing with taxing and spending policies. The deficit over the last multiple decades has been increased more under Republicans than Democrats, and more of the debt was acquired under Republicans than Democrats. And so all of this is posturing, it's good for talking points, and they brand it very effectively because a lot of people have the wrong understanding of this issue. But it's all of these dangerous steps for a very disingenuous reason. It's not actual concern based on actual principles. And then Hakeem Jeffries brought up there, which I've said in past segments, it's hard for me to get my head around this being the goal, but as we get closer to a debt ceiling crisis, maybe it is the fact that this could be a calculation that the economic damage that will be caused because of us defaulting on our debt, that helps in the eyes of Republicans, them get a Republican elected president because of how the president is often blamed for whatever happens while they're president, even if it's not on them, and they often get credit for things that they didn't do. But it goes both ways. And so with this, maybe the calculation is, as we get closer to a disaster situation, Biden's going to get blamed a lot. The economy is going to be hurt a lot, and usually that's not good for an incumbent running for re-election, and that could help the Republican. I talk about the modern GOP daily. Still, that seems, crossing a line as lines are constantly being crossed. But what I know is, even if that wasn't the ultimate plan and they did want to get these concessions, they thought they could get them, they're okay with playing with fire as they are because Biden's president. Okay, maybe they want to get the spending cuts and they were hoping they could get something, but if they don't, they're okay with us defaulting on our debt because Biden will be hurt likely politically, even though he shouldn't, because he's perfectly good raising the debt ceiling, clean, simple, not attaching Democratic demands to that. It is the other side that is attaching demands to this. Last moment we'll look at from Hakeem Jeffries.
This is a default crisis that is manufactured MAGA madness. It is repugnant, reckless, and reprehensible. It's unacceptable, it's unconscionable, and it's un-American. And that's why House Democrats have remained on the House floor fighting hard for everyday Americans.
I will say, especially as I was covering and watching politics in the lead up to when I actually started a show of my own, and then for much of that as well, one of my big issues with Democrats, one of the things that was really enraging to watch, is it seemed like their messaging was never effective enough, and especially didn't match the moment. The severity of, the aggressiveness of their message, I should say, didn't match what was going on the other side. It wasn't a response that I felt was justified. They should have been more serious and more effective and all that. And we're getting more of that now, and it's really exciting to me because Hakeem Jeffries has had moment after moment that we've gone over that more accurately calls out moments that we're in, and more accurately calls out something as a political stunt, a dangerous one that will hurt people like this is.